It's the Lekker Rugby Pod, only on Megaphone Rugby.
But tell me about the French in terms of DuPont. This is Harry called this the greatest French team that's ever been assembled, with some of the best players in the world playing for that team. Tell me about the French and what we can expect from them. Are they favorites? Are they sort of runner-up favorites? What can we look forward to?
At the moment, the pressure on Galtier, the French head coach, is immense. It is you must win, preferably the Grand Slam, if not the title. The talent, exactly, the golden generation is the word being used, and with that, crop of players, most of whom I think there's 8 Toulouse players in the France starting team to face Wales on Friday. That Toulouse team is being called the greatest club side that we've ever seen, at least in European rugby. So to not be able to translate that, it's not as if Toulouse are built off foreign talents. Of course, there are fantastic non-French players who play for them. But the core of that Toulouse team is the core of the France national team. So to not be able to translate that into Six Nations success is irreconcilable in the head of French fans. And it is very much the case of in France, Galtier, you must win this Six Nations because the last one they won is in 2022. That's what, with this generation of players, one title in 5 years, it's not going to fly. It's not going to fly. So the French will see themselves as favourites, and I think that is reasonable, and I think that they could well be favourites. The only thing that counts against them is that they have 3 away games, I believe, or at least they have to go to Dublin to win, which is going to be a huge challenge. But it's an interesting time for France because they weren't flash in the last Six Nations, and then obviously they always send their rotated team on the summer tour. And if there's anyone from the New Zealand Rugby Union watching, they do that every year, guys, just so you know. And then in this autumn tests, obviously, they thrashed Argentina, who were fantastic all the year up until then. And they beat the All Blacks without, I want to say they didn't concede a point after the 20th minute, something like that. So the expectation is there. And France is probably the closest thing to New Zealand and South Africa in terms of how big rugby is there. So Bordeaux are playing Toulouse in March in a club game. That's been moved to a stadium that has 42,000 seats. It's sold out in 3 hours. Went on sale this morning, sold out in 3 hours. The rugby is not a niche sport in France, unlike where it is in arguably every other country in the Six Nations. Rugby is a big deal in France, a very big cultural deal. And to not see that translated into success, it's a bit like England in football. It's unacceptable.
So, Hugh, the pressure is immense also from this angle. The people in France are talking about how Hugo at Toulouse is doing better with his spine plus Willis, Chocobaris, Malia, Kinghorn than Galtier is doing with same Toulouse spine with Penaud, Bilberry, and Aldrit, which shouldn't make a hill of a beans of difference. Aldrit is as good as Willis, is as good as Aldrit. Arguably, you could say Penaud probably clearly better at wing than Kinghorn in finishing, and then you could talk about maybe in the midfield. You could argue, but there's a lot of pressure if most of your country is saying the club guy is a better coach than you at the test level, and that might be unfair. But when you look at a year ago, which is what I do, Six Nations is very stable MVS, so you can really compare apples to apples. That's what's cool about it too, is the stats work. So a year ago, the French were only +6 on points differential in the 2024 Six Nations. That's unacceptable to be only +6. There is no way that could happen in a Toulouse kind of situation. The other thing is they played a lot on the blind side. They played very tight. They were by far the best mauling team, but it didn't have finishing caliber. And so, DuPont not being there for 2024, you have to figure out, for part of it, you have to figure out at some point, the French should be better. The French should be better in 2025 than 24. Is that how you see it, Hugh? That one of the musts is they have to show improvement from 2024. And if they do, then you have the proper duel that we want, which is Ireland versus France for all of it in round 4.
Yes, absolutely. They must show improvement. The last Six Nations, I mean, they drew with Italy at home. Now, Italy are much improved, but
Yeah.
that again, that's not acceptable. You know, the narrative, whether we like it or not, will be last year they didn't have Duponts, this year they do have Duponts. Now, the other thing that they also have back this season is Dupont's best friend, Roman Untermack, is also recovered and is available and is starting alongside him in the number 10 jersey in what some people are calling the greatest halfback combination, greatest duo of our generation. It's the Gareth Edwards, Phil Bennett of the 2020s. So yes, they have to show it, and they have to. The thing that I saw in the autumn tests, particularly against the All Blacks from France, which was missing in the year up until then, was identity as a team, was what they wanted to do, and it's not complicated. I think there are some teams playing quite intricate rugby, and I don't think France are doing that at the moment. It was very much a Shaun Edwards defence, which Shaun Edwards defence goes like this: stand in a line and tackle someone if they run at you. And you know, it's not the Nienaber like innovative, incredible defense. It's pretty simple and it works. You know, sometimes rugby isn't a complicated game. And then they have these wingers. They have the French Leckerbacks, the scrum capped wingers who are fast, and they're skilled. The individual talents of some of the players they have in their backline is off the charts. And Louis Bielbarré being the main example of that at the moment.
That's what's interesting, though. People say French flair and chaos and all that. They don't. They play really proper power rugby. They use the blind side. In last year's tournament, they used the blind side 32%, come way over the charts compared to the other teams. They mauled 20 meters a game compared to Italy's 0.4, and they don't fling the ball about as much as you think. So you watch the French; they do long kicking, they exit quickly, and then they back themselves on their gain line. You know, they're 32%, 33% dominant carry kind of team. So they don't have to have as many carries as the Irish. When you look at that translating now into some of these new patterns and shapes of the game, with greater access to ball catchers, do you think the French will shorten their kicks to promote more of that kick chase for Louis Bielbarré and Penaud, and try to crash that catcher more, kind of catch Freddie Stewart in the act of catching it? And do you also think that the space allowed for the 9? So there's two changes: greater access coming from your box kicks from 9, and also more access to the 9 to shape the kick and maybe run. Do you think that are those Dupont and Legaric favorite rule shifts, or how do you see it?
I think the French prefer to kick long. I've watched a lot of Toulouse and UBB, and I don't recall them doing much in the way of box kicking. You know, what we think of the Grant Williams to Mapimpi style box kick, which is phenomenal to watch in itself. I think they prefer to turn you. They kick behind you, and then let's have a foot race. Let's take you on. Let's see if you're slow on the turn, and execute you that way. You know, if you look at France's backline, it's not the biggest anymore. Moafana at 12 is not huge. Louis Bielbarré, again,
Tiny.
not massive. Penaud is injured. So it's Theo Atasogbe, who can play fullback. So he's got skill in the air. But if you look at Toulouse's best exponents aerially is Blair Kinghorn. And obviously he's playing for a different team. So I'm not sure that they will look to kick contestable. Dupont being allowed even more space and even more time than he's already got. Dupont, if you watch him, he very rarely passes off the base. He can do it, obviously. But if you're expecting an Aaron Smith style zip pass straight off the floor, it's not what he likes to do. He picks it up, snipes a bit, runs sideways a bit, maybe even runs backwards a bit.
Backward, yeah.
Which is why his carry stats are so high. Is because he's padding it up with these like 2-3 meter runs before he passes it. Always sniping, always asking questions. So I mean, it'd be classic if I'm wrong here and they destroy Wales using this tactic, but I think, like you said, Harry, I think they prefer to kick long, honestly.
It seems to be one of the pillars of the Galtier era is that they kick so much longer than anyone else. And famously in the quarterfinal, Rassi Erasmus found a way to use that against them, but it took a while. The other Six Nations teams don't seem to be able to solve the power riddle of France. What they just do is they seem to get them at the end. Is there a case to be made that Jameson Gibson Park, who is not okay, he's not Dupont, but he's not that far off Dupont in terms of skill level. If you have a Jameson Gibson Park and a Connor Murray 1-2 punch, and Murray gets significant minutes, so it's a real 1-2 punch, versus France of like ride Dupont until he's almost dead and then maybe put on LeGarrick. Maybe in rugby terms, it's better to have the 1-2 punch. Do you think that plays almost Dupont's greatness and how good he is almost having them overplay him sometimes?
Sometimes. What they seem to be doing at the moment, because if France have gone for a 6-2 split, and they've got LeGarrick and Gallatin from Poe on the bench, who's a centre. So what I think they're going to do, which is what we've seen them do up until now, is that Dupont will play in a different position, and he might nominally move back to 10. Now, you'll hear some people getting a little bit giddy about, oh my goodness, Antoine Dupont is now playing this position, that position. Like in the game against the All Blacks, I think it was, for example, he moved to 10. I don't think he touched the ball after he moved position, or he maybe did 1 or 2 times. So he obviously every player touches the ball less than a scrum half, but you might see that when LeGarrick does come on and Dupont moves perhaps back to fly half, he kind of might drift out of the game a little bit. And I do wonder whether this time in sevens, he's yet to really get back to the 15s level of conditioning. He's slimmed down a lot this season. He looks a lot quicker. One of his most underrated attributes is his pace. He looks a lot quicker, but I'm not quite sure his conditioning is 80 minutes worth at the top level at the moment. So yes, to answer your question, if you can sustain for 80 minutes, I think that is a way to get to France.
That's an important question, thing you've raised there. So France plays off 9, almost like MVA, like Fleury de Priya, Bulls, and Box back in the day. So your stats at a Butch James, fly off are not going to be the same. Six Nations stats for fly. The last time that Intermac played a full Six Nations, if you looked at his stats of kicking, they were 40% of Finn Russell, Owen Farrell. Kicking out of hand. Touches, so few. And it's because Ramos almost plays like that double playmaker. So you shift Dupont at 10. He's just on the field as support runner, a ruck. He's a good rucker. But he's not necessarily playing the way you would think Pollard would play or a Bigger would play at 10. Next thing I want to talk to you about is the Caterpillar. So MVA, one thing I raised about how interesting to see is in the Six Nations, you have a full tournament, properly coached. And so you say on a shorter Caterpillar, you have less time to form it. The referee's gonna ping you. Remember Grant Williams against the All Blacks, 2 seconds, boom, done. So you're gonna have to have that. And so then by definition, you're gonna have not 2 or 3 people in that Caterpillar. You're gonna have 1 or 2. So Hugh, tell me about what do you think, who's that favor, Ireland or France or someone else?
It's a good question. I think I'm not sure it's going to favor anyone in particular. I think if anyone, it will favor France because, like I said, they like to kick long and they don't play in their own half. Some other teams are a bit more willing to play in their own half. And of course, it will favor the teams that have potentially relatively weaker scrum half. So Italy in the recent years have struggled with the scrum half position and kicking from scrum half. So if there's more control over that area, maybe that's more towards the access to the nines. But I find it funny, it's not to change the subject, but how in rugby union we always trial like the biggest, most impactful law changes at international level first. Like it's never like try it, maybe it's semi-pro, then work it into URC and then bring it into Six Nations. It's always no, what's the thing that everybody's watching the most at the same time? Okay, do something mad then that we will definitely not get right the first time.
Everything with tiny sample size, like 5 matches, 5 rounds, instead of the NFL does a 3-year study and, infinite number of algorithms. And then before they change something, and rugby is like, oh yeah, so the 20-minute red card's fine, go, So one thing I do think is funny about cards, speaking of cards, is you go back last year and look at the cards. Ireland, the best team, had 5 cards. France, second, 4. Then you go down, 3, 4, 2, 1. Italy had the fewest cards. So Wales had the fewest cards. It's almost like if you don't play rough and tough enough, you don't get carded and you're not going to win. But the idea that a card in and of itself predetermines where you finish on the log is debunked. It's no one wants to be carded on attack with their own ball. That makes no sense. But there are times in rugby when to soak up defense, you're going to be infringing on purpose, almost like in basketball taking fouls. And then also you can survive a card, can't you?
Absolutely. I think the stat was last season that Ireland conceded by far the most penalties of anybody in the Six Nations by a long way. And I think you yourself, Harry, did a graphic about it of there is no correlation between penalties given away and results. And it's a cliche, and I promise you you'll hear it during the Six Nations where our commentators will say, if you give away more than 10 penalties in a game, you won't win Test rugby matches. It's not true. It's completely untrue. There's no correlation. I can show you an example of a game between France and Italy a couple of years ago where Italy gave away 5 penalties, France gave away 20, and France won by a lot in that game.
Easily, yeah.
And also, I think knowing the players who know and have that aura about them, dare I say, the Richie McCaw aura of I can give away a penalty here and it's a good penalty to give away. And I think a player who's really becoming excellent at that now is Maro Itoje. I think he's excellent at I'm going to give away a penalty here, and because I'm Maro Itoje, and but by the way, this is praising Maro Itoje. Because I'm Maro Itoje, I know the referee will give me the more grace than he would another player. So I'm going to give away a penalty here that another player might get yellow carded for, and in doing so, I will save my team conceding a try.
Yeah, I think Maro's good at early in the match. It's first 10, 15 minutes, so no one's going to be carded for repetitive. He infringes. He just keeps infringing. So he'll just keep infringing 4 times on that one series because it's just one. Like in the end, the ref's going to go, okay, that's it. But he won't get carded. And so you use 4 really good fouls. And the whole goal is don't let opposing team score try early, which is huge in the Six Nations, starting well. Another question I've got for you is, are we going to see more broken field play? Six Nations. World Rugby has announced that's a key element. They want more space, more phases, and they want more broken play by encouraging things like the potential 50-22 and the opposing 9 being set off. Do you think we'll see more of that, or will we kind of rugby is stubbornly still a football game when you kick the ball?
Yeah, and the a line out can be not straight if the other team doesn't jump as well. I think we will see more ball in play, and I think broken play. I think the rule that came in about a year or so ago, or is new for this season in the Northern Hemisphere anyway, is they got rid of that Dupont's law of you have to retreat to get back on side, and we've seen a lot at club level of teams learning to exploit this and tries being scored off kick return, where your team is planning for how hard you're working to get back on side and for the chaser to overtake the rest of the team and for the team to retreat. And we're going to see teams get that wrong. And what it means is that sometimes you're going to receive the ball as someone covering the backfield, and you're going to have to run, because if you kick it, your whole team is offside in front of you. And maybe you're in a position where it's not realistic where you can overtake them. So you're going to have to run. And at test level, that's going to lead to a lot of turnovers and a lot of mistakes.
Are you happy about the touch finder technology where we're not going to have this beautiful debate between the 10 who kicks the ball out and then scowls, frowns, gesticulates to the touch ref saying, oh, you cost me 10 meters. Because now we're going to have an actual chip that's going to tell us exactly where it crosses.
Yeah, that's a bit of drama that's left for the sport. Isn't it funny about how the things that we leave, like TMO reviews, have to be to the human eye? If you watch soccer, they're drawing lines on the pitch to be millimeter, Hawkeye type things. Whereas in rugby, this is watch it, and no, I reckon it's fine in some things. But then things like that, it's like, no, to the millimeter, this is where the ball went out.
It doesn't matter. I mean, it really doesn't matter that much. I mean, if it's near the 5 meter, 5'7", it's not like the touch guys.
Are they going to do that for where the penalty was awarded from? So when the kicker takes 10 paces forwards from where the penalty was awarded from to steal a bit of extra.
Finn Russell.
Yeah, well, they all do it. But when are they going to do it for that end? No, just the end of where it lands. I think sometimes, let's just all be adults about it.
I like how Finn does it, though. He puts the ball down on the ground, rolls a bit. He's talking to the ref, and he looks at the crowd, points at something, and then nudges it a little bit more. And he's really smooth. He's a smooth criminal.
Yeah.
Tell me about the Slimani factor. You have a prop for the French coming back into the fold, who's playing for Leinster. This just smacks like pure Galtieism, you know. Just like tell us how to get under the skin of the Irish scrum.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it? And he's been a bit of a revelation at Leinster as well. It was a bit of out of a nowhere signing. And of course, there's the funny story where at first he thought his agent was saying, "Do you want to move to Leicester?" And he said, "No." And went, "Oh, no, Leinster."
Is
"Oh,
that
I
a real
see. Oh,
story?
yes." He told it in an interview. Um, yeah, it's just great. It's a great, smart thinking by Galtie, and he is a smart man. And every time he does something even more nefarious, the rims on his glasses get thicker.
It's the Lekker Rugby Pod, only on Megaphone Rugby.